In the small town of Dalton, Alabama, life moved at a pace as steady and slow as the river that cut through its center. Generations grew up under the same sun, walked the same cracked sidewalks, and graduated from the same red brick high school, Dalton High. On the surface, Dalton looked like a picture-perfect postcard town, but just beneath that veneer of southern charm, old prejudices simmered quietly. At the heart of the town's tension stood Principal Gerald Whitmore, a tall, silver-haired man in his late 50s, whose smile could charm a crowd and whose handshake was as firm as the values he was raised on. Some good, some not. Having grown up in Dalton himself, Gerald carried the pride of tradition like a badge. He believed deeply in order, in respect, and in maintaining how things had always been done. So when a group of black students at Dalton High, led by a bright, articulate senior named Malik Johnson, requested to form a club called the Unity Society, Gerald's mind slammed shut like a trap. The Unity Society's mission was simple: a safe space to celebrate black culture, history, and resilience, while fostering conversations about racial identity and community empowerment. To Gerald, it sounded like division. "We don't need separate groups," he muttered to his vice principal, Shelley Carter, one afternoon in his office. "We are one school, one community. End of story." The students submitted their proposal formally, citing the school's own handbook that allowed for student-led organizations. They had a teacher willing to sponsor them, Ms. Diana Lee, the history teacher who had quietly been pushing the school board to include more diverse narratives in the curriculum. But Gerald Whitmore was unmoved. At the next student council meeting, he made his announcement public. "Dalton High does not permit clubs based on race, religion, or nationality. We celebrate unity, not separation." His words echoed across the crowded auditorium, and the murmurs that followed were like small brush fires sparking up in dry grass. Malik stood up, fists clenched at his sides, his heart pounding so loud he could barely hear himself speak. "Principal Whitmore," he said steadily, "we're not asking to separate. We're asking to celebrate who we are, and to educate others too." Gerald shook his head slowly, disappointment creasing his face as though Malik were a naive child. "Request denied," he said, final and cold. By the end of the week, word had spread beyond the school walls. Parents whispered at grocery stores. Local Facebook groups exploded with arguments. Some parents, mostly white, praised Whitmore for standing strong. Others, black families, and a growing number of white allies, were furious. A storm was brewing, but Gerald Whitmore, sitting tall behind his oak desk, didn't see it coming. The Friday after the rejection, a quiet protest took shape. About 40 students, black, white, Latino, and Asian, wore black t-shirts with the words "Unity is not division" printed in bold white letters. They stood silently in the courtyard before the first bell rang, holding hands, refusing to move until they were heard. Gerald Whitmore watched from his office window, his jaw tightening. His first instinct was to order campus security to disperse them. Officer Darren Smith, a burly man with mirrored sunglasses, waited for the signal. But Shelley Carter, his vice principal, placed a firm hand on his arm. "They're peaceful," she said quietly. "Let's not escalate this." Gerald relented, but his resentment deepened. Later that day, in a closed-door meeting with the school board, he portrayed the protest as a disruption, a symptom of what he called modern hypersensitivity. "Kids these days," he sighed. "They need discipline, not indulgence." Across town, Malik met with Miss Lee and a group of parents at the local community center. They strategized about next steps. Among them was Jasmine Cooper, the mother of a sophomore named Aliyah, who had been one of the students in the courtyard that morning. "We can't let them silence our kids," Jasmine said, her voice trembling with rage. Dalton's been sweeping this under the rug for too long. They decided to take it to the media. By Monday, a regional news station picked up the story. A clip of the students standing silently in protest aired during the evening news. Then it spread further: Twitter, Facebook, local blogs. Hashtags like #UnitySociety and #LetThemSpeak trended in Alabama and beyond. Gerald was furious. "They're making us look like bigots," he barked at the next staff meeting. "Maybe," Ms. Lee said softly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Because that's how it looks." Shelley Carter sat in the corner, biting her tongue. She didn't agree with Gerald anymore, if she ever truly had, but she wasn't ready to confront him publicly yet. Meanwhile, pressure mounted. Local activists, university professors, even some small businesses started voicing their support for the students. The school board received dozens of letters demanding change. Yet Gerald stood firm, arms crossed, heart hardened. He didn't yet understand. Dalton wasn't the same town he had grown up in, and the students weren't the same students he had once taught. Change had come to Dalton, whether he was ready or not. By the end of the week, the pressure was undeniable. Students at Dalton High staged a walkout. Not just black students, but a racially mixed crowd of over 200 teenagers marching silently through the streets, holding handmade signs. "Equity is unity. Our voices matter. And history includes us." Malik walked at the front beside Aliyah Cooper and a few others, their determination steady despite the occasional scowls from bystanders. Ms. Lee watched from the sidewalk, heart swelling with pride and fear. Inside the school board office, Principal Whitmore sat stiffly at a long table with the 7 board members, all of whom were white and older than 50. Superintendent Charles Dean, a balding, careful man, leaned forward. "Gerald," he said, his voice low but serious. "This isn't going away. We have to respond." Gerald bristled. "We are responding. We're standing firm." "Standing firm isn't working anymore," board member Linda Pritchard added. "Sponsors are pulling donations. Parents are threatening to transfer their kids. The town's image is suffering." Gerald rubbed his temples. He had dedicated 30 years to this school. He couldn't understand how offering equal treatment could be twisted into accusations of racism. "We need a compromise," Dean said. "Fast." The compromise they proposed was weak. Students could create a diversity club, but it had to be open to everyone, with no specific cultural focus. Malik and his group rejected it immediately. "We already are open to everyone," Malik said during a town hall meeting. "But we also deserve the right to celebrate who we are." The town hall was a powder keg. Parents screamed over each other. Old grievances spilled out, from school discipline disparities to biased history lessons. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked. At the end of the night, standing before the microphone, Malik spoke again. "You can't heal what you won't face," he said simply. "We aren't asking for permission to exist. We already do. We're asking you to see us." Those words ignited something in the town of Dalton. Something irreversible. The next morning, Dalton's mayor, Patricia Evans, called an emergency meeting. The mayor was a cautious woman, but shrewd enough to recognize when a line had been crossed. After all, the town relied heavily on tourism and small business, and the headlines were beginning to tarnish its image far beyond Alabama. We cannot afford to become a national symbol of racial intolerance, she told the city council, her voice slicing through the thick tension in the chamber. We need systemic change. The council voted to establish a Commission on Racial Equality and Education, composed of teachers, parents, students, and civic leaders, tasked with reviewing the school's policies. Meanwhile, students continued their daily silent protests. Their black t-shirts became a fixture on campus. Teachers like Ms. Lee quietly supported them, weaving lessons of civil rights and peaceful protest into their curriculums. Not everyone approved. Whitmore, clinging to authority, issued stricter dress code policies that suspiciously banned slogans and symbols that create division. He called parents into his office one by one, warning them about consequences. But the students were ready. They had lawyers now, civil rights groups who offered pro bono representation. Any attempt to discipline them would ignite even greater backlash. Shelley Carter, once Whitmore's loyal second-in-command, found herself slipping into meetings with Malik and the other students, offering advice on how to navigate school politics. "I can't fight him for you," she said, "but I can make sure you don't get blindsided." And so the cracks widened, not just in Dalton High, but in the town's very foundations. It wasn't long before national media descended on Dalton. CNN vans rolled through the sleepy streets. MSNBC aired interviews with the students. Even local conservative networks, eager for controversy, arrived with their cameras trained on Malik and his friends. Principal Whitmore found himself giving a disastrous interview to a local station, where he insisted, "Dalton High is colorblind. We treat every student exactly the same." The clip went viral. Commentators pointed out the obvious flaw. Treating everyone the same in a deeply unequal system only perpetuates injustice. Meanwhile, Malik was invited to speak on national television. Sitting stiffly under bright lights, he wiped sweaty palms on his jeans and faced the anchor. "Principal Whitmore says he's being fair," the anchor prompted. "What would you say to him?" Malik leaned into the microphone, his voice strong. "Fairness isn't pretending we're all the same. Fairness is recognizing our differences, our histories, and making room for everyone to belong." His words struck a chord far beyond Dalton. Suddenly, Dalton High wasn't just a school. It was a symbol, a microcosm of a larger American reckoning. And Principal Whitmore? He became, in the eyes of many, a relic of an era the country was trying to leave behind. Facing mounting public pressure, the Dalton School Board convened an emergency open meeting. More than 300 people packed the gymnasium. TV crews lined the walls, signs reading, "Let them speak," and "Equality now," waved from every corner. Principal Whitmore sat rigidly at the front, flanked by stone-faced board members. Malik stood in the center aisle, clutching a written statement in trembling hands. "Today," he began, voice ringing clear over the murmurs, "we are not just asking for permission to form a club. We are demanding acknowledgement of the injustices that exist right here, right now, in our school." Applause thundered. Gerald Whitmore's face turned an angry shade of red. Parents shared stories of discrimination their children had faced. Harsher punishments, fewer leadership opportunities, subtle slights. Ms. Lee took the stand, speaking passionately about the gaps in the curriculum, how Black history was crammed into 1 month and often sanitized beyond recognition. Finally, the mayor stood up, holding a document in her hand. "In consultation with educational experts and community leaders," she said, Dalton will implement mandatory racial equality and cultural competency training for all students and staff, effective immediately. The room erupted, half in cheers, half in angry muttering. Gerald felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. Change was no longer on the horizon. It was here, knocking down the door. The new curriculum rolled out within weeks. Classes called American History's Many Voices became mandatory. Workshops on implicit bias, restorative justice, and cultural awareness filled the calendar. Outside facilitators, many of them people of color, led the sessions. At first, there was pushback. Some parents protested, some students rolled their eyes, but slowly, conversations began to shift. In Mrs. Lee's classroom, white students sat in stunned silence as they learned about events they'd never heard of. The Tulsa Massacre, redlining, the civil rights battles beyond Martin Luther King Jr. Students began questioning why these stories had been hidden. Malik, Aaliyah, and their friends led discussions with patience and passion, fielding uncomfortable questions with grace. Even Shelley Carter admitted, after one long workshop, "I thought I understood before. I didn't." Principal Whitmore, however, refused to attend the sessions. He filed grievance after grievance, claiming his authority was being undermined. The board responded by placing him on administrative leave pending review. When Gerald packed up his office, the hallways felt different, livelier, louder, more real. He passed Malik in the main hallway. For a long second their eyes met. No words were exchanged, but Gerald felt the full weight of everything he had failed to understand. By summer, Dalton had changed. The Unity Society not only existed, it thrived. Membership ballooned beyond what Malik had dreamed. Black students, white students, Latino and Asian students all joined, drawn by the club's promise of honest conversation and true community. New murals appeared around town, vibrant, messy, beautiful depictions of Dalton's diversity. One showed students of every race linked arm in arm beneath the words, "We rise together." Malik received a scholarship to a prestigious university, majoring in social justice and public policy. Ms. Lee was promoted to Director of Equity and Inclusion for the entire school district. Shelley Carter, once a passive enabler, became an outspoken advocate working to reform disciplinary policies. As for Principal Whitmore, his resignation was quietly accepted by the board. He moved out of Dalton within the year, disappearing into obscurity, his once proud name now a cautionary tale. Dalton was not perfect. Racism, bias, and fear didn't vanish overnight, but the town had learned something vital. Progress wasn't polite or easy. It was messy, painful, and absolutely necessary. In the fall, Dalton High hosted its first Equity and Justice Conference. Students from across Alabama came, filling the gymnasium with fresh energy and bright ideas. Malik returned as the keynote speaker, standing on the same stage where Gerald Whitmore once denied his voice. He smiled at the sea of faces, brown, black, white, all shades between, waiting expectantly. He spoke about the power of storytelling, of persistence, of hope. Change doesn't happen because people in power decide it's time, he said. Change happens because people refuse to be silent. Tears filled the eyes of parents in the audience, including Jasmine Cooper, who squeezed her daughter's hand tightly. Aaliyah, now president of the Unity Society, introduced the next speaker, Ms. Lee. Together, they outlined a vision for the future. A future where schools didn't just tolerate diversity but celebrated it, where students learned the full tapestry of American history, where every voice mattered. Dalton was no longer just a sleepy southern town. It was a place where something extraordinary had begun. Years later, Malik Johnson returned to Dalton, his degree in hand, now a respected community organizer. He stood in the newly renamed Unity Auditorium, once Dalton High's main hall, looking at the portraits lining the walls, civil rights leaders, educators, students who had made a difference. In the center hung a mural painted by Dalton students, an image of a tree, its roots tangled but strong, its branches reaching toward a wide blue sky. Underneath it were the words, "From silent voices to shouting hearts, we rose." Malik smiled, feeling a swell of pride. Dalton had not been easy to change, but it had been worth it. And as long as voices rose, even shaky, even scared, change would keep marching forward, louder and stronger than ever. Because unity wasn't the absence of differences, it was the celebration of them. And now, in Dalton, every voice finally had a place to be heard.